she saw it, a humanoid figure emerging from the water. Terrified, Ngozi grabbed her wooden spear and ran into the jungle, hiding among the trees. She could hear the rustling of leaves and the sound of footsteps approaching. Her breath caught in her throat as she tried to stay as silent as possible, hoping the creature wouldn't find her. In the bustling city of Lagos, where the streets are alive with the sounds of honking cars and busy markets, lived a young woman named Ngozi. She was an adventurous spirit, always searching for the next thrill, always looking for the next place to explore. So when the opportunity came to join her friends, Emeka and Uche, on a boat trip along the Nigerian coast, she didn't think twice. But as the saying goes, not every journey ends where it begins. The weather had been perfect when they set sail, with clear skies and calm seas. Ngozi, Emeka, and Uche laughed and joked, enjoying the sun on their faces and the wind in their hair. But by afternoon, the weather turned. Dark clouds gathered on the horizon, and the sea became restless. Before they knew it, they were caught in a violent storm. The boat was tossed around like a toy, and in the chaos it capsized. Ngozi remembered the cold, unforgiving water pulling her under, her lungs burning as she struggled to reach the surface. Then everything went black. When Ngozi regained consciousness, she found herself on the shores of a deserted island. The only other survivor was Emeka, her close friend, lying unconscious beside her with a life jacket still strapped to his chest. She tried to wake him, but when she turned him over, her heart sank. A jagged piece of coral had pierced his stomach, and he was barely alive. Desperate, Ngozi screamed for help, but the only response was the roar of the ocean. She took off her life vest, dragging Emeka further away from the water. With trembling hands, she removed the coral from his stomach and pressed her scarf against the wound, praying it would be enough to save him. Knowing she had to find water, she ventured into the nearby forest. The dense foliage was a stark contrast to the open beach, the air thick with the scent of damp earth. After some searching, she found a coconut, broke it open with a rock, and hurried back to Emeka. But it was too late. As she poured the coconut water into his mouth, she realized he was already gone. Tears streamed down her face as she held his cold hand, her heart breaking with the weight of her loss. Ngozi was now alone on this forsaken island, surrounded by nothing but dense forest and a seemingly endless ocean. The grief of losing Emeka weighed heavily on her, but she knew she had to keep moving. She couldn't afford to give up. She walked along the beach, trying to make sense of her surroundings. The island was small, with only a strip of beach and a thick forest at its center. As she circled back to Emeka's body, she made a promise to herself that she would survive, no matter what it took. Venturing into the jungle once more, she discovered a clearing where a bag was hanging from a tree branch and a red cooler sat nearby. Excited, she called out, hoping someone might answer, but there was only silence. The bag contained some old medicine with a date from 1994. Whoever had been here was long gone. The cooler held bottles of Coca-Cola, but Ngozi knew she needed more than that to survive. Moving on, she found a thermos and a small metal box inside an abandoned tent. The box held a deck of cards, matches, and other items, but nothing that could help her escape. Returning to the beach, she had a sound coming from a hollow tree. Investigating, she found a colorful tropical beard in seed. It was a small, comforting sign of life on this lonely island. She gathered some leaves to cover Emeka's body and sat beside him, staring out at the vast ocean, wondering how she would survive. That night, a heavy rainstorm hit the island, forcing Ngozi to seek shelter under some leaves. She used her jacket to shield herself from the downpour, feeling utterly alone and helpless. The next morning, the storm had passed, and Ngozi found small fish stranded on the beach. As she picked them up, she noticed something that made her blood run cold: a dead shark, split in half, with deep unnatural marks on its body. Something on this island was not right. Ngozi tried to clean the fish with a flat stone, but her hands were shaking, and the task proved too difficult. Frustrated and scared, she returned to the cooler. Sitting down with her meager belongings, she opened her diary, only to find that the rain had washed away all the ink inside. The photo of her and her boyfriend, Chinedu, was the only thing left intact. Determined to survive, Ngozi ventured deeper into the jungle, where she found another clearing. There, she discovered a burial site for 3 people who had lived on the island long before her. The sight sent shivers down her spine, making her realize just how isolated she truly was. As she returned to the beach, she saw that Emeka's body was already decaying. She knew she couldn't leave him like that, so she dragged his body closer to the forest, dug a shallow grave, and buried him there, placing a piece of wood with the initial of his name on it. That night, Ngozi made a makeshift bed and roasted some of the fish she had caught. It was her first night alone on the island, and as she lay there under the stars, she wondered what other dangers might be lurking in the darkness. The next morning, Ngozi walked along the beach, hoping to find more resources. But what she saw instead left her horrified. Emeka's body had been removed from the grave, mutilated, and dragged away by something or someone. Fear gripped her as she realized she was not alone on this island. She quickly grabbed a piece of wood, sharpened it with a stone into a spear for defense, and looked around, expecting to see something in the shadows. But there was nothing. Night fell again, and Ngozi stayed fully alert, listening for any sound, any movement that might indicate the presence of whatever had disturbed Emeka's grave. But the night was eerily quiet, leaving her with only her racing thoughts. The following day, she saw something in the distance, a glimmer of hope. She swam out to find it, discovering a bucket and a suitcase floating in the water. Diving to explore further, she saw a dark hole in the ocean bed, a mysterious and ominous sight that sent a chill down her spine. Ngozi took the bucket and suitcase back to the beach, where she found a pair of sneakers and some clothes. That night, she changed into the dry clothes and put on the sneakers to stay warm. Sitting by the fire, she examined the metal box again, finding a secret compartment that hid some old photographs. But before she could make sense of the images, she heard the distant sound of a plane overhead. Her heart leapt with hope. She ran to grab the flare gun she had found earlier, firing it into the sky. The first shot didn't work, but on the second try, the flare shot into the sky, glowing brightly. Ngozi waited, eyes fixed on the horizon, praying for a response. But as the flare disappeared into the distance, her heart sank. Then, out of the corner of her eye, she saw it, a humanoid figure emerging from the water. Terrified, Ngozi grabbed her wooden spear and ran into the jungle, hiding among the trees. She could hear the rustling of leaves and the sound of footsteps approaching. Her breath caught in her throat as she tried to stay as silent as possible, hoping the creature wouldn't find her. Hours passed, and finally the footsteps faded away. The next morning, Ngozi returned to the beach, her heart pounding as she looked out at the ocean. The island once a place of sun and sea, had now become a place of fear and isolation. The danger was real and it was coming for her. And that's where we'll leave Ngozi for now, alone on an island that holds more mysteries and dangers than she could have ever imagined. What is this creature that stalks her? Will she find a way to survive, or will she become another lost soul on this cursed island? If you're as intrigued as we are, make sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss part 2 of the Cursed Island. Thank you for joining us on this journey. Stay safe, stay curious, and remember, sometimes the greatest dangers are the ones we cannot see.